So you're welcome to keep your questions for afterwards. We can answer them and see how we go from there. Okay, let's begin. So as you all know, POPI came into operation last year, 1 July 2020. And even before POPI was ever thought of or imagined, the right to privacy was already envisioned in terms of the Constitution. Section 14 of the Constitution states that everyone has a right to privacy. So POPI was originally enacted to give effect to Section 14 of the Constitution. Like I mentioned, last year, 1 July, the commencement date for POPIA, and the lawmakers then gave everyone a grace period of 1 year to get their houses in order, to become compliant, to do the necessary in order to comply with the Act. That's coming up quite soon. We're now in the end of March, so 3 more months to go. It seems like a lot of time, but it's not actually. So I hope that you guys are getting there, getting your houses in order, getting compliant, however, which way you'll be doing so. For this webinar this morning, I just want to highlight the key points of POPIA, as well as how one can become compliant. Going forward, you can speak to Zelinda. She'll be chatting to us a bit afterwards, just on how you can go about getting assistance or help with the Act. So let's begin. This will be my skeleton presentation for the morning. I'm going to try and make it as practical as possible, because since doing a lot of these webinars myself, I've done a few lectures as well. It's very difficult to read an Act and then decide how are you going to become compliant. I've received a lot of questions from people asking, but you know, the legislation is all fair and well, but what must I practically do? So I'm going to try and just explain that as simple as possible. And before I begin, I just want to let you know, the Act is very important. Yes, it's a piece of paper, but I have my own copy with me and I keep it on my desk at all times. Whenever there's a question I've got, I always start with referring to the Act before I can answer a question. So if there's one thing you do, print the document. It's a couple of pages if you need it. And I feel it helps me a lot when I have questions that I can't answer or I need to answer. Okay, let's begin then. So we want to know, who does this Act apply to? Does it apply to me? Does it apply to the body corporate? Does it apply to a company? Who does it apply to? So in the Act, you've got the first section of the Act is the definition clauses, which shows what the different words mean. And I always refer to that in the beginning whenever I'm looking for an answer. And what POPIA says is that it applies to any person that processes personal information. Now, if we unpack that, there's 3 aspects: any person, processes, and personal information, which I'm going to break down for us. So a person refers to in the Act a natural or juristic person. Now, to unpack that further, a natural person is me or you, an individual human being, and a juristic person is an association of natural persons, a company, a corporation, a partnership, a sole proprietorship, and this includes a community scheme, which is an association of people. Body corporate, an HOA, a share block scheme, whatever falls under community scheme. So that is, POPIA applies to any person who then processes personal information. Then I'd like to unpack, what does processing mean? Because we know that it applies to us now, but are we processing personal information like the Act says? So again, in the Act, under the definition section, they refer to what processing means. Now, under processing, it refers to any activity, automatic or otherwise. So it's whether you're on your computer, whether you have some paper lying with you on your desk, any activity relating to the use of personal information. And personal information, I will break down further in the next slide. But processing means collecting, utilizing, storing, sharing, or retaining or destroying that personal information. I'd like to illustrate by way of an example. But before I do that, I just want to unpack what is personal information. Now, the Act is quite specific when it lists quite a few examples of personal information. The list I've given is more applicable to us this morning and to community schemes. So I've listed full name, your ID, or your registration number if you're a company, your age, your physical or postal address, your contact details, your phone number, your email address, your religion, and your sexual orientation, to name but a few. The list that POPI have given us is a non-exhaustive list, which means that it doesn't include everything everything on the Act isn't everything that is applicable. So there could be many more information that could be applicable to what personal information is. What I want to just highlight to you is that it's very interesting that they mention identifiable living natural person and an identifiable existing juristic person. It's very interesting. I attended a lecture 2 weeks ago, and what the lecturer told me was that we are the only country that lists personal information to identifiable existing people. In Europe, for example, the GDPR, which is the equivalent of POPI, they apply their privacy legislation to deceased persons and to deregistered companies. Interesting enough that we don't do that. We only apply it to living people and existing companies. So this Act doesn't apply to deceased persons and to deregistered companies no longer with a registration number. So just some little information, little interesting information. What I want to do now is just illustrate a person processing personal information. However, an example. I've just called it ABC Body Corporate. So there's a body corporate, they've got 24 units, and I just purchased unit 1. So now I want to know that does POPIA apply to the body corporate and to myself and the information that I provide to the body corporate via the managing agent. So I purchased the unit, and the first thing that the managing agent wants is my information to record me as an owner, my name and my address or my domicile, my contact number and my email address, and the necessary information in order for them to record me as an owner and then to issue me with a monthly levy statement. So in that way, they collect my personal information. They utilize my personal information by using it on a monthly basis to send me my levy statement. The levy statement shows my name, my domicile, it shows my email address, it shows the levies that I pay on a monthly basis. So they are utilizing my personal information on a monthly basis. They are storing the information because they need to keep a record for future use. They're going to use it this month to issue a statement. They're going to use it next month to send me a warning letter because I infringed one of the conduct rules. So they are storing my information on an active basis. They're also sharing my personal information. And by way of an example, I'd like to mention Prescribed Management Rule 27, which allows for an owner to request information of another owner of a scheme. So let's say I'm on the top floor and my washing machine has now leaked and caused damage into the unit below. What that owner will do is they will contact the managing agent and request the information so that they can contact me and resolve the issue with the damage and the leak. So they are sharing my personal information. Then once I am no longer an owner, I sell my unit. They then retain the information as per law for 5 years, and then they destroy the information with however means they do so. So that is how a body corporate processes personal information, and that is why POPIA is applicable to a body corporate or a homeowners association or whatever the case may be. This was a question that I got a few weeks ago as to, does POPIA apply to a body corporate? And the answer is yes. I've just shown you that it does do so. Okay, now that we've established that POPIA is applicable to a person, what I'd like to do next is just to highlight the requirements for processing personal information. So once you are processing the information, however means you do so, there are certain conditions that POPIA have outlined that you need to comply with when using, collecting, storing, sharing, or retaining the information. Section 825 of the Act highlights the 8 conditions. I've listed them here. You can read up further. The Act it has been drawn up quite nicely. It's very easy to follow. So if you make use of the document, highlight those sections and always refer to them when you need to. I'm just going to work through each of the conditions, but also in a simple format so as to understand what each term means. I don't want it to be just legal jargon. I know it's not always easy to understand, so I'll just try and unpack it as simple as possible. The first condition is accountability. And this is quite interesting because what the Act has now done is create a positive duty on a person to act. A lot of the times legislation doesn't create any duty on a person. It will say, you may not steal. So, well, I'm not going to steal. It doesn't create an obligation on me to do something. I just must not do it. However, with POPIA, it creates a lot of positive obligations on persons to act. In this way, it states, in certain terms, you are accountable to the person that you collect the information from. You have a duty to them to keep the information, to keep it safe, to record it correctly, and do the necessary to ensure that you protect the information. So that is where this duty is created. You have a positive duty to make sure the information is protected. The next one is processing limitation. So it creates a limitation on the way you process the information. It can only be done in a lawful manner if you need it, and if you obtain consent and it's collected directly from the client. So I'll unpack that further. Processing in a lawful manner means there must just be a lawful basis in order for you to have processed the information. Now, for community schemes and for body corporates, that lawful basis is the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act. So you are processing it because the Act gives you an obligation to do so. Same as the CSOS Act does as well. When collecting information, you have to get consent to do so from the owner. That is implied because the owner, when giving you the information, they are consenting by providing the information to you. When you contract with the person, what you can do is create a little tick box whereby when they're providing the information, they can tick, I herewith consent to providing my information. So a lot of the contracts that I work with already have that built in. There is an exception to this though. A lot of the times information is a public record or made public by the person themselves. So for instance, via the deeds office, a lot of the information is public record already. You can go and check if I own Section 1 at ABC Body Corporate. It's not, you don't consent for me to do that. Same as if I post something on social media, I've now consented for that information to be out there. Those are the exceptions to collecting directly from me or getting consent. Okay, next slide. The information you collect, there must be a purpose for it. Now, in the context of community schemes, the purpose is the administration of the scheme, the collection of levies, and that is a specific purpose you're working towards when you are processing the information. It must be defined. An owner must know why you're collecting the information. That's usually self-explanatory because they know when they are submitting the information, it's most likely because you're going to send them a statement every month. You are part of the body corporate, so you need to have information that pertains to the body corporate. What's interesting to note is that information collected cannot be retained any longer than necessary. So if you have information that you no longer need for that specific purpose, you have to get rid of it. It creates a further positive obligation to get rid of information. So I know many offices, mine included, we have an archive room where there's documents, and it creates an obligation on us as a team to make sure that after a specific period of time, if the purpose for which we've collected information is achieved, have to get rid of it, whether it be shredding, however you get rid of your information, you have to get rid of it. That is what the Act states. The next, just before I carry on, just on information collected, a lot of times legislation requires you to keep information for a specific period. And an example would be a doctor. Even once you are no longer a patient, he has a legal obligation to keep the information for at least 6 years. So there's a bit of an exception to the rule. But once those 6 years are up, he has an obligation to get rid of that information. The next step or condition is a further processing limitation. Once you've achieved your purpose, you have to get rid of the information. And what I've seen is, and we had this at the lecture that I attended a few weeks ago, I can give an example, when I enter a competition online, there's usually a tick box to say that, do you consent to us sharing the information with a subsidiary? Now, if I think of KFM, they usually have a tick box. Do I consent to sharing information with News24 or any of the other companies they work with? And usually I tick yes or no because I'd like to get information on that. What's interesting to note is once KFM is done with my information and they have shared it with the subsidiary, once their purpose is achieved, they have to destroy my information, and in doing so, contact the subsidiary and destroy the information as well. It's quite interesting to note that most likely your information with the company, you've completed whatever conduct you've done with them, but other companies have your information as well. And it's important to note that they actually cannot have that information anymore. They have to get rid of it. So just something interesting to note. Okay. The next condition is the quality of the information. It creates a further obligation on the company or the body corporate or the HOA or any other corporation to make sure the information that you are collecting is accurate. That means that, well, from a practical point of view, you have to continually engage with your clients and ensure and ask them, confirm with them, is the information correct? Do it on a quarterly basis. Send out a bulk email. Please confirm this is your email address, your contact number. So instead of waiting for the owner to come to us to give the information, it creates a duty on us to ask them on a regular basis, is this information correct? Do we have the correct email address for your levy statement to be sent on a monthly basis? Do we have the correct contact information if we need it for when the time comes? It's interesting because, again, legislation doesn't always create this positive duty, but POPIA does so now. The next condition, openness. When you collect the information from another source, a practical example, if we have a tenant that I deal with most likely on a daily basis, sends me his landlord's new email address, I can't take that as face value. I have to ask the landlord or confirm with him, do you have X? Is this your email address? I've received it from the tenant. Another positive obligation on the person to act. The next section, I think, is the most important. And if you take away anything from today, I think this is the most important. And I want to stress this as much as possible. Security is, I think, the main reason why POPIA was enacted. Have to ensure that the information you are collecting at your office or keeping is secure. They mentioned in the Act, you must implement reasonable technical and organizational measures. So from a technical point of view, that means your software on your computers, the server you work from, it has to be watertight. And in a way to ensure that what I say to a lot of clients is that the company who's doing your online server or managing it and the software they provide, the antivirus software, ask them to provide in writing that everything is secure. Ask them to provide some kind of assurance that what you've got in place is secure, that there can be no hacking. The server can't, if the server goes down, information won't be lost, whatever the case may be. From an organizational point of view, it's important that employees are trained on the Act, how it's applicable to them, how it's applicable to the office, and where they keep their physical documents. A simple principle that I was taught a few weeks ago as well is the clean desk principle. It seems silly, because when I spoke to a client yesterday, he laughed at me on the phone, but it does seem silly. But when you leave your desk at the end of the day, make sure there are no papers on your desk. Pack them in the cupboard, have a key for it. Again, even for me, it seems silly because as we speak, my desk has a stack of some minutes I must look through, a few agreements I must look through. Technically, I'm not being compliant. Those documents should be put in a file somewhere and locked away, so as if there is a break-in or something happens, the information is still kept safe. Another important thing to note, what the Act has now done is, if there is a breach or personal information is compromised, you have an obligation to inform all parties, including the Information Regulator. That's quite important because before, if let's say an ID was stolen, you'd let the owner know, listen, I've lost the information. But what's different now is, besides informing the owner, you have to inform this Information Regulator. The Information Regulator is a new body that was created by the Act. It's similar to that of CSOS, which is the body that now ensures compliance with POPIA. What's important to note, I'd like to give an example of something that happened, not to me personally, but we had a breach. I heard of a breach of one of my ex-colleagues. They sent out a document which included an Excel spreadsheet of all the owner's information. It's quite embarrassing because, you know, when you send out an email, you've got to always double check to make sure that the information is correct. What you're sending is correct. So what she had to do was she had to then go back to every single person that they had emailed and apologize and said, we've mistakenly shared this Excel with your name, contact number, email, etc. What they didn't do at the time and what they would have had to do now is, besides inform the party of the breach, they have to now inform the information regulator. That's a further step that you must take when there is a compromise of personal information. We'll go back to the information regulator in the next few slides. The last condition, it just means that owners who submit their personal information, they will always have access to it. If I, as an owner, own Section 1 in ABC Body Corporate, and I want to know what information you've got on record, I'm entitled to that information. It seems simple because most likely we do that already. We let owners know what we have on record for them, but the Act just highlights that a person has access to the information. They can also ask you or ask any other company what information they have of yours, and also to provide instruction to correct it, to amend it, or to delete the personal information. Okay. Our next point is just on compliance. I know it seems a bit scary, this fine of 10 million and 12 months imprisonment, but what's important to note is a lot of the requirements I've mentioned, a lot of us are already complying with them as we speak. And we've been doing so most likely since the introduction of the company or the body corporate since inception. So I don't want anyone to panic or be fearful of these consequences. It is important to note, yes, but majority of us are complying with the Act while we are sitting here. Just on the two bottom consequences, besides an imprisonment or a fine, an owner whose information has been compromised, besides reporting it to the information regulator, they can actually file a civil damages claim in conjunction with reporting it to the regulator. So if I suffer damages as a result of my information being lost or compromised, I can then sue the body corporate, the managing agent, the company, if I suffer damages. So it's quite interesting because you can do both, and you can do both at the same time. With regards to filing a report with the information regulator, I was talking to Zelinda yesterday about it. It's quite scary to know that if you breach for whatever reason, and it may be intentional, it may be not, you have an obligation to report it to the regulator, which means that every time that a mistake is made, again, intentional or not, the regulator needs to know about it. That means that every breach, let's say you've got 5 in a year. If I want to contract with a specific company, I can approach the regulator to ask them, does XXX, have they had any breaches in terms of POPI? That may affect our contractual relationship going forward. It's quite interesting to note that we're going to be reporting it to parties when we compromise the information. Now there's a third party we have to report to, and that may affect our future relationship with businesses, with companies, with clients going forward. So it does have pretty big implications for companies. And that's why I think they're trying to stress the importance of compliance with the Act. I want to talk about the information regulator and the then next point, the information officer. In terms of the Act, every organization or company has to appoint an information officer who's then responsible for compliance with POPIA. Most likely this is designated to the head of an organization, a CEO, managing director, the chairman of the trustees, or whoever the case may be. And the information officer works hand in hand with the regulator. So when there's a breach, they are the ones that report directly to the regulator that there's been a breach, and they work together to investigate and to come to an outcome after there has been a breach. With the regulator, they, again, like I mentioned, they're similar to that of CSOS. And what happens is, let's say I've realized that the managing agent lost my ID document and now it's landed in the hands of someone that I don't know. I will then report it to the information regulator. They will then investigate the breach to determine how it happened, what the company is going to do not to avoid it happening in the future. And if they reach an outcome whereby they fine the company 10,000 Rand, that fine or that order holds the same weight as a court order. It's quite interesting. Their capacity or the weight they carry is quite substantial. Again, it's to that equal to that of a court order. So any fine you receive or whatever the case may be, it is binding on you and you have to comply with that. With regards to the information officer, don't panic in terms of, oh my word, now I have to be the officer. What if I get the fine? It's just to make sure that someone is designated as the head of the company, same as if you're already a CEO. You just have to ensure compliance, and you do that by way of appointing deputy information officers in your office, who then deal with the day-to-day running of the business, who deal with the information on a daily basis. So you won't specifically be dealing with the information yourself. You're delegating it to people or employees in your team. And that is why it's so important that employees are trained or well-versed in how the Act works. It shouldn't only be the CEO or the managing director or the chairman of the trustees. It should be every single person, because they are all responsible at the end of the day for compliance. Okay, so from a practical point of view, I know it seems daunting, and when I started looking at the Act, or when last year July, I thought to myself, how am I going to wrap my head around this? It seems quite hectic, if I may use that word or term. And after reading the Act, after doing a lot of webinars, after lectures that I've attended, and I've realized that it's not a difficult process, but you have to start somewhere. So, like I said, keep calm, don't panic. It is true. Any company, you're able to be compliant. And like I said, you are probably already compliant as we speak. What I'd like to mention is a few points I've made. Seek guidance on this externally. At a property webinar I did a few weeks ago, I mentioned, don't attempt to do it on your own, because understanding the Act is one thing, but implementing is a different story. Appoint someone to assist you, whether it be, the lecture I attended was with a group of attorneys. They said to me, get your competitors to come to your office to look at what you're doing, get external advice, train your staff, appoint someone, a consultant doing this, get someone to come and have a look at your office to do an audit, consult with a specialist who can then help you with compliance for your company or organization. That person or whoever who is assisting you, whether it be your compliance officer or your legal officer or a company or a firm of attorneys, get them to assist you with the appointment of your information officer and to register, same with the regulator. There are some resolutions you have to complete and submit to the regulator. So it's important that you appoint someone to assist you with that and not do it on your own if you aren't certain. If you are certain you have any questions, rather get someone to assist you. The next point is develop a framework or manual that guides compliance. This seems like a tick in the box just to get this manual out there. I'm sure you've heard about it on other webinars, this idea of a POPI manual. And it is important, even though it's just words in an Act to say, develop a framework that guides compliance. But from my point of view, it's important to have a document that you can work from and that's updated on a regular basis. It shouldn't just be a piece of paper that you draft and you pop it in your desk, you lock it with a key. It should be something that is looked at on a biannual, quarterly basis. The Act specifically says that an information officer has a duty to develop a framework. So it's creating a positive obligation on your information officer, your head of your organization, to create this framework. Again, consult with the external party to assist you with this manual. They most likely have done a few before, and they can assist you with what needs to go in the manual, how you can apply it, how it can be amended from time to time. And then lastly, again, I know it seems silly, clean desk principle. So when you leave your office every day, something as simple as putting the documents in your filing cabinet, locking it with the key and keeping the key. I think it will go a long way in ensuring just a little bit of compliance from an employee perspective or from anyone in your organization's perspective. If you do that, I think it will go a long way in ensuring that there will be no breaches or any compromising of information. That is me. Just a little joke that I found online. It's interesting how much information Facebook has of yours or any other social media network. And I think the movie is called, what is this movie called, Celinda?
Oh, Nicole had the name, social.
Nicole had the name.
Social something. Nicole, maybe.
If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's on Netflix. It's super
Social
interesting.
Dilemma.
Cool, that's me.
Fantastic.
Right.
Thank you very much, Leigh-Anne. Just a quick word from us. I do see that there were a couple of questions posted in the chat function. I'm going to ask everyone just to ask their questions for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll head over to Mike. And then after Mike, we'll open it up for some Q&A again. For 7 days after today, we will be offering a discounted rate to all of those that attended today's presentation, just to be able to prepare for them PAIA manuals, POPI manuals, a privacy policy if your company or the scheme that you manage has a website, an employee form if your company does employ people, or the body corporate or the HA has employees. We submit the PAIA manuals to the necessary authorities, and we register the information officer. We can also offer the services of inspecting your offices to have a look around as to how the information should be properly kept. And then, of course, we offer training either face-to-face or via webinar, obviously, if you're not in Cape Town. So the promotion code to be used for that is on the screen right now, and you can just pop us a mail to info@tvdmconsultants.com. That promo is going to last only for 7 days. If you are a managing agent and you have contacted us already, you will note that the discount is the same as what we offer our managing agent clients. So the promo in all likelihood is going to be, beneficial for direct trustees, direct body corporates. So do contact us in the next 7 days for that. I'm going to open up the floor to 1 or 2 questions, Leigh-Anne. Let's have a look. See, please remember to unmute yourself if you've got a question, and then please do mute yourself if you're not asking a question, especially if there is background noise. You can just raise your hand. I see Marissa, you've got your hand up. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I have a question. In the case of CSOS, we now pay a levy for it. So my question is, for this POPIA, is there going to be also a levy? And if so, who is paying for it? Every citizen, body corporates, managing agents? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. It is a good question because it's something to consider, but no, there's no levy that will be payable to the Information Regulator, whatever the case may be. There's nothing in the legislation that prescribes same, so no, there'll be no levy that will be payable.
All right, we don't have any...
Oh, sorry, Zelinda.
No, I was just saying we don't have any other hands up, but we do have a couple of questions on the chat.
Yeah.
Can I run through 1 or 2 of them? So some of them that were asked earlier, I thought this was quite a good question, is can the managing agent or must the managing agent be the information officer for their managed schemes?
It is a question I've been asked a few times, and in my personal opinion, I won't recommend it for myself, purely because the risk on an information officer as a whole is quite substantial. If there is any breach or compromising of information, the consequences are quite severe. So I think it's important that the head of an organization, the chairman of the trustees, or the CEO or MD is the information officer. However, what the Act does is it prescribes that you can delegate the authority to deputy information officers, which is your managing agent, which is the employees of the scheme, which is the employees of the managing agent. It doesn't preclude managing agents from becoming information officers, but I think it's just important to note that if that is something you'd like to do, just make sure you have the necessary in place in terms of risk if you wish to take on that role.
Definitely. The next question I have is also an interesting one, is if a body corporate or a homeowners association, lost it now, is going to be taking on levy financing, is it okay for them to send the information? And I'm sure, I know it's a question that Puna raised before as well about meeting PAL, about giving that information for the purpose of running a meeting. Is there any wise words you have there?
There's your purpose. If the purpose is, look, the managing agent would have appointed, or the body corporate would have appointed meeting PAL to run a meeting. So in essence, you are complying with the STSMA, which is your lawful basis. So you've always got to fall back on, whatever you are sharing or processing, is there a basis for it? Yes, there is. Thus, you can share the information via Meetingpile because it's for the purposes of running an AGM or a special general meeting, whatever the case may be.
Okay. We've got a question for Mike. Mike, I'm sure you're going to cover it, and if not, you can just address it afterwards. It's the information officer question for Mike. Insurance policy will not cover managing agent, but cover trustees, I think. So just keep that at the back of your mind. Please confirm that biometric information, fingerprints, etc., is also personal information, Leigh-Anne.
That's correct. There's a specific part in the Act that states biometric information, fingerprints are also known as personal information. So when it's being collected, at your guardhouse for your HOA or your body corporate, the company who's collecting it, whether it be the body corporate themselves or you outsourcing it to a security company, they have to make sure that the information they collect, they also comply with the Act when collecting that information.
And then security footage, what is your view on that?
Same. It is, the Act does specifically refer to CCTV, but again, in terms of keeping CCTV, usually there's a external legislation aligned for how long you can keep the information for. So the same applies. If you have to keep the video footage for a period of 6 months, you are complying with the law. So you are entitled to do so.
Fantastic. Somebody asked, do you have a template for a form where customers request information? Do you have a template of the POPIA framework? So that's exactly what we are doing or offering to do for you. So please contact us via info@tvdmconsultants.com for the discounted rate for the next 7 days. The movie that we spoke about earlier is called The Social Dilemma. Here's one more question, Leigh-Anne, and then we'll head over to Mike. May the managing agents give the contact details of a caretaker of the body corporate or the HOA to other owners?
Look, it is a tricky one. I read it. I think it's important that to cover your bases, rather ask for the purpose of what the information why they're requesting it. Are they requesting it in terms of them assisting them at the body corporate, or what is the purpose of them wanting the information? And if you are satisfied that the purpose is reasonable, you can submit the information because they form part of the body corporate as an employee. If you are not satisfied with the purpose for which they want the information, rather first ask that caretaker or employee for permission.
Okay, fantastic. We will have time for more Q&A after Mike, but we don't want to keep everybody too long after 11 o'clock, and we've got about 16 minutes until then. So Mike, can we hand over to you?
Right.
Mike, you should be able to share your screen.
Yes, got it. Okay. Morning, everybody. Can't hear any responses. Everybody's muted. So I'll assume that everybody is saying good morning back. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's very interesting, Leigh-Anne. Thanks. That's really super, and it's helped me know where to go with my presentation, because mine can be very short and it can be very long. So it's going to be a short one with the time. Just interesting, Clive Reynolds is here. So Clive and I have got a very good relationship, and we often discuss these sorts of things. And Clive raised something with me a couple of years ago. Clive, you might remember, is policy information. So one of the practices that I see is some of the insurance companies actually name people in their policies. So some of them call it the PQ, some of it call it the schedule. But essentially, it's supposed to be an endorsement reflecting the schedule of replacement values that is then endorsed in the policy after you've prepared your schedule. And what I've noticed is some of the companies, particularly the more directy sort of companies, tend to publish everybody's name. So they have everybody's name on the schedule next to their PQ, next to their section number, effectively their address and their bond amount. Now, we did raise it with a specialist attorney at the time, and we haven't actually got a straight answer whether that would be a problem. Listening to Leigh-Anne, I suppose the purpose is to disclose this for an AGM, but I'm recommending to clients right now is to rather avoid. I know your intention of some people, actually some portfolio managers in their AGM packs actually include the whole policy. So I'm suggesting that's a bad idea. The intentions are honorable, but I think given what we've been discussing this morning, I think try the least information that you dish out at AGMs is probably nowadays the safer bet. I don't know if everybody agrees with me. I suppose we could debate that point, but I would recommend that you do a schedule of replacement values with only the required information on it. Nobody's name and nobody's bond, specifically which bank they're with and so on. Okay, that's just my suggestion. I think it's quite rude actually to disclose everybody's information. Okay, if it's not in conflict with POPIA, I think it's a bit rude. Okay, so and also the policy number. I'll explain that just now. I think, you know, once you're starting to give a policy number, who the insurer is out there, some estate agent can pick it up quite easily later, or it gets dished around. You know, you're starting to open up avenues and opportunities for fraud. I've even had some fraudulent ideas, because obviously I'm always trying to think like a thief. How would we prevent losses? And so I'm not going to share my ideas here with you this morning, but I think that there's some insurance fraud ideas if you're dishing out too much information. Okay, moving along. A few weeks ago, we did a presentation on what we need for managing agents and bodies corporate in terms of insurance, and we unpacked them and we put things in boxes. In fact, we were going to call it putting insurance in boxes for the industry. But I didn't want to repeat stuff because I know many of you were at that presentation, but I'm just going to touch on one or two things. So this morning, just to understand where I'm going with what cyber risks, cyber liability and cyber risks are, we just need to understand fidelity, funnily enough. So we're going to take a step back. If you look at the traditional fidelity, which we all now are familiar with, and then the CSOS compliant fidelity, and I'm assuming most people here are managing agents from the names and people that I'm seeing here, the familiar names. We're familiar also with the CSOS compliant facility. We don't need to discuss that. You've got your traditional fidelity, but what's important to understand is these days, given the risks, we need to look at commercial crime. Okay, and I'm talking now, I'm speaking for the body corporate and the managing agent, and I'll come to that. I'll differentiate. So commercial crime, first of all, one needs to understand, I'll call it a fidelity plus policy, or a fidelity policy on steroids, modernized for the cyber world, because it includes cyber fraud, computer fraud, electronic data loss in some cases, fraudulent transfer instructions, and unidentifiable employee losses. Now, what one has to be careful here is when you are getting or obtaining quotes from your broker needs to understand the body's corporate risks quite well. Gone are the days where, you know, some broker can somehow just give you a policy and somehow just fidelity. I think that's dangerous these days. You need to look at the proper policies that include computer crime. I'm talking body corporate now. And if you look at the body corporate's policy, you'll see that, for example, CIA, which seems to be the widest, CIB, I would say second widest, perhaps that's debatable. We're still busy analyzing and negotiating to see if we can change a few things there. But if you look at the CIA policy, you've got fidelity and computer crime. Okay, now it gets a little bit confusing because you've got computer crime, cyber risks, cyber liability, all of these terms bandied about. And in some cases, they're different policies. And in fact, in most cases, I'll explain the difference now. So you need to understand the difference. You don't need to be an insurance expert, but just understand, as a portfolio manager especially, or a serious trustee, just know that computer fraud, first of all, is important because that's very prevalent out there. That's what we highlighted last time. But you can also, within the CIA policy, you've got data protection, which is great. Now that's important. Now you must remember some policies don't even have that. Now when you're looking at POPIA, I think that's answering the question that was raised a bit earlier, half of the question anyway. We'll answer the other half just now. You are having a little bit of cover. And if you look, I'm just drilling down into, I did a screenshot of one of our clients' policies. You'll see that the managing agent is even, I've obviously blocked that out. The managing agent's name is here, but there's fidelity and computer crime, which is required in terms of CSOS, but then we've got data protection. And look at this, it's as much as R1 million that they've given, and they're not even charging a premium for it because they've built it in. So I think, hats off to CIA. If you've got a CIA policy, you're pretty much covering some of the bases in terms of it. I'm not going to drill down into all to the boring policy wording because frankly, we don't have enough time. But very, very briefly, if you go and look at the policy wording, what is data protection? It's your legal liability arising out of a cyber event, your legal liability arising, crisis management costs, and so on. Okay, so these are some of the costs that arise that Leigh-Anne was alluding to. Okay. I am working through this a little bit fast. Obviously, each managing agent and their clients have a different situation. I promise you, I'm not going to tell you why right now, but if you want to discuss that with myself, my colleague Candice is here also online, and Candice at AdSure will definitely be able to help you with that. She's set up a whole lot of products to help managing agents with them. Believe me, there isn't one fit for all. It's a different fit for different folk, different budgets and different scenarios. For example, a one-man show managing agent or a two-man managing agent is very different from a managing agent with a whole lot of portfolio managers, and we need to look at those carefully. Now, if you look at this embarrassing questionnaire that some of you are battling with, I know you're battling with this, is when CIA send a form to you now, because now you've done your fidelity and you want a fidelity application, there's some questions that get asked. Name of managing agent. Is the managing agent with the Estate Agents Affairs Board or other professional body? Yes or no? Does the managing agent hold professional indemnity cover? Okay. And further down, does the managing agent have fidelity cover? So must they have it? Well, there's no legislation that says, that I'm aware of, that says a managing agent must have it. It's always been recommended, and even in the old days, the State Agents Affairs Board used to recommend on their website that managing agents have their own fidelity cover. Now, why am I telling you this? Is because it's a message to managing agents. You really do need now these days to have your PI and fidelity in place. And they even go as far as to question whether you've got R1 million worth of PI cover. The reason for that is if there is some sort of breach or concern or problem, and whilst the body corporate is refunded, obviously, as all insurers do, they try to recover from the naughty person. So later they will try and recover from you or someone else, and the risk is much lower if you have PI cover, if the managing agent has PI cover. So I confirmed it before this presentation that if you're answering the question, no, you don't have these covers, it doesn't mean you're not going to get cover for your client. What it means is the client is actually going to pay a higher premium, believe it or not. Okay, so that's the downside of not having the cover. So a managing agent who has PI cover and or fidelity cover, it's certainly standing you in good stead for your clients in terms of their insurance. Okay, so I'm trying to keep things in boxes again. So professional indemnity is important for a managing agent, and so is the commercial crime. So you needed to understand that commercial crime part and why it's called commercial crime. So commercial crime, I call it the more modern way of speaking about fidelity. So looking at the managing agent only now, if you have PI cover, professional indemnity cover, there you can buy an extension for cyber liability. And I'm going to explain now the difference between cyber liability and cyber crime. So there's your, call it your POPIA cover. Okay, so on your PI policy, you buy an extension and you buy some data protection or cyber liability or cyber liability. Okay, some of the policies have got more extensive extensions than others, and that's why we've got to look at your needs individually. Not one thing fits all. Commercial crime fidelity, and if you've got a proper commercial crime, not an old-fashioned fidelity policy, you will include cyber or computer crime. Or you can buy both of the right-hand side policies separately. They can be included or separately. Okay. So I break it down like this. This is the easiest way. So commercial crime, first of all, is your fidelity on steroids, but it includes computer crime and cyber crime. And then your cyber liability and your data protection is the POPIA type of stuff. You lose data. Okay, and it's set out very nicely in a diagram which I showed at the last presentation. I found this on the internet, so it's obviously not a South African one. We've got a dollar sign. So what is that? A US dollar? Yeah. Okay, so if there's a cyber attack or a cyber breach, or somebody comes into your system, in other words, they hack and they get in. Okay, whether they're hacked with a trick or whether they're hacked through a piece of software like we've had lately, one of two things happen. Either they're going to get hold of money or trick you into paying money somewhere, and there's a loss of money. Okay, so money is lost. Now we're talking crime, cyber crime, commercial crime, computer crime. So there's your crime. Okay. Employee action, data loss, data transfer, and these are the things that Leigh-Anne has been speaking about. Now we have cyber liability, cyber loss. Okay, and that's the difference. A lot of brokers don't even know the difference. I know that one of you here are present this morning, and I know that your broker even got this wrong. Okay, so just be careful. If you're thrown a proposal form for this, remember it's not necessarily including this. Or if you get a form for this, it's not necessarily for this. You need to cover both of these bases these days. Okay, this I never used to put much emphasis on, even though it's been around for a while. Particularly with companies like Camargue, but we haven't pushed it because POPIA hasn't really been biting yet. But I think it's clear we need to do something. Leigh-Anne, you've done a good job this morning of frightening people, and that's good for insurance brokers. I'm only joking, please. I've said that before publicly, and I got into a lot of trouble for saying that. Okay, so here we go. I've just taken a snapshot of somebody's little policy, and it's probably typical of what one of you have. If you look at this is straight from a schedule. Professional indemnity of R1 million with a 30,000 Rand excess. The total premium for the year is 87. Data protection extension of 250,000, which is maybe a bit on the light side. The total monthly premium is 915 Rand a month to give you basic coverage. Just to give you an indication, everybody asks how much will this cost? Okay, it's probably going to be cheaper, or depends on what the cost or how much you buy. Okay, so looking at the cyber risks quick in a nutshell, you can take a separate cyber risk policy. In fact, so what Leigh-Anne has said this morning probably makes us all feel we need to go and buy a specific cyber risk policy. And Camargue have got one. And it's interesting from the point of view is, they use the example. Now I've got this, I'm not going to be shy to tell you that they've got this handy booklet that I refer to, Camargue, very, very, very good company. And they say here, so perhaps I should be saying this anyway, so it's reference, Camargue, well done for your booklet. But they give some examples here. I mean, they say it's, for example, if you were to, what happens if somebody got hold of the bank account detail and as a result, somebody else committed crime in that person's bank account because of the information that you let out the bag? That's the type of liability problem that could occur. So as a professional extension or a separate policy, multimedia liability could be included. It's not necessarily in just the data loss extension, but multimedia liability. You could write a blog on multimedia, or we could be saying something here on this presentation that could upset somebody and give some. I mean, I might have popped up a slide by mistake when I was sharing my screen and popped up to everybody to see somebody's personal information. That would have been very naughty of me. So I could have also made a mistake. Security and privacy liability, insured's negligence in preventing a breach. I think Leigh-Anne has alluded to that already. Data recovery or loss of income. It's a form of business interruption cover, which means that you're going to lose income during your downtime that you're now trying to fix your breach, and you need to recover all of your data, and that's expensive. So you can insure against some of those costs. Privacy, regulatory, defense, and penalties. And this is quite interesting, and we actually haven't had a claim here ever before. And in fact, I don't think that we've actually had this extension on one of our policies yet. I'm talking about penalties, but in the normal course of liability cover, you know, if you get a fine or a penalty, you're not covered. But it seems that one of the insurers, in this case Camargue, are covering it. We want to drill down into the wording. If you do get a fine, you might even be able to get cover. I'm going to use the word might for now because I haven't actually seen that depth of the policy as to when and when they won't pay for a penalty for you. But certainly the defense costs would be there, because as Leigh-Anne said, you know, it could be, you know, you could be both the regulator, or it could be a private person taking action against you. And then crisis management costs, you know, as Leigh-Anne said, you know, now you've got to tell all of these people, and you've got to do a whole lot of stuff, and you've got to follow a process. Some of the insurance companies help you through that. They give you guidance. They almost give you a manual on how to unpack this step by step on how to do your crisis management. And in fact, in some cases, will pay a company to do it. And then, of course, there's certain protection for data extortion, because once somebody's got your data, they might be holding you to ransom. Okay, so that's it really in a nutshell. From my side, it's really the focus is on data protection and cyber liability, the liability that follows from a cyber attack. And I think before you just go and buy that cover, just be aware of the other type of cyber covers that are out there, so that you don't think one is one and not the other, and vice versa. In fact, you probably, if you can afford it, you know, you try to buy the whole lot. I think we're all at risk for just about everything now. The unfortunate thing is, and it's not a bad reflection on brokers out there, because we're in the same pot. It's just that we're focusing on bodies corporate and managing agents, and we're getting to better understand the risks. Just as an example, I always say to clients and especially to our colleagues, a broker's experience actually comes from the mistakes he makes, and also dealing with claims. And I think it's probably true to all of us, especially managing agents. I think there's some similarities between the way we operate. The more experience, the more mistakes you've made in the past, and the more you've dealt with claims, because claims are horrible experiences. And that's after 10 years of dealing with professional indemnity and fidelity, we actually learned a lot, and we knew a lot. But now this is fairly new. We haven't had a data a breach claim yet. We've had a few fraudulent ones, but no data breach. And so, you know, we're all in this, in the learning curve together. But I certainly do think that managing agents need to start understanding this stuff too. Okay. All right. That's it from me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mike. If you can just stop sharing your screen, that'll be great. Thank you. All right. So, Mike, for your part of the presentation, you've kindly sponsored a prize, and Nicole did a bit of a randomizer for us earlier on. So obviously, if this person is in the audience, we just need them to confirm, and then you can make contact with Mike or Candice just with regards to your contact details for the prize to be sent through. Shirley, just hold up a copy of your book again that we can see what it is. There we go. Keyword access. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Mike's also got it open in front of him. Fantastic. All right. So according to the randomizer, we have Karen Sujan. I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly. I'm so sorry. From UTH. Is Karen here? Just remember to unmute yourself if you are. Karen?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Congratulations, Karen. Karen, if you can just make contact with Mike or Candice, their email addresses are on the chat function, then you can obviously claim that prize. Thank you very much for attending today. Ladies and gentlemen, can we open a Q&A?
And we'll destroy your information soon after.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mike? I know that Clive had one or two on the chat function. Clive, do you want to raise them now?
Clive's trying to catch me out, I think. Where's Clive?
Mike, here I am. Just a silly question there. You mentioned on the CIA proposal form a 2-level authorization. I think that our experience in talking to a couple of brokers, and I see one of your sidekicks, Yako, is also here, and Fidelity is quite a complicated matter to deal with. When dealing with Fidelity, the managing agent and the body corporates generally get very confused, and you and I have had very many conversations about that, and also Yako, your colleague. Now, the two-level factor. I think some people think that if you're in a managing agent's office debiting a body corporate account with a banking function, it could be something as simple as just making notes on your internal records. We don't see it that way. We see it that at least two people in the managing agency have to have separate banking codes, and the one is authorizing, for example, the other one is releasing. But speaking with a couple of brokers, there does seem to be confusion within that fraternity itself. I'm not saying any of the gentlemen that I've mentioned now. Maybe you could just chat about that, because I know that some brokers think that if you're in your office and employee 1 makes a note and then employee 2 makes a different note and employee 3 logs on and authorizes with the bank, that's adequate. I don't see it that way, but can I hear what your thoughts are and maybe any other thoughts? Thanks.
Yeah, I think, Clive, we do try to, as you know, chat to managing agents and understand how they set out. I don't, I don't want to even give anything away to other names and stuff, but where people are individuals, there is a challenge there, because what the insurance companies want to see is that not only one person, and this is not so much from the personal information. In fact, this is more on the risk side, in terms of theft, is that payments are made with a two-step process. So somebody loads the payment and then somebody else authorizes the payments. So that's the broad stroke of what they want, and we are having more discussions with them ongoing, to see how we can get around that for some people that operate individually. And of course, there are other solutions for people that operate individually. We just go to a different insurance company, to be quite honest with you. Okay, so we're quite strict. But you raise a very, very good point, because the proposal form that you're submitting to the insurance company, and I didn't elaborate on that when I was rushing through the presentation, is that if you talk nonsense on your proposal form and a claim comes, that's where the stickiness comes. For example, on the CIA form, if you say that you've got no PR cover, rather not lie and say that you have when you haven't, or that you're intending getting it, because when the claim comes, it's not going to be your fault when the claim comes necessarily, and it could have been a claim on the CIA policy. Now the managing agent's got no PR cover. The insurance company haven't received enough premium. They didn't load it accordingly, and they would be well within their rights. I'm not saying they will do it, but they would be well within their rights to reject the claim entirely, just because you said yes instead of no. So I think it's more a case of working with your broker. My scenario is this, and let the broker help you unpack it. Okay.
Fantastic. Rosemary, you've got your hand up. Just unmute yourself.
I don't know if this is a silly question or if I'm off the topic, but my understanding is that all trustee payments have to be authorized by quorum. Now, some managing agents use the portal We Connect You, where there's only one or two places to authorize a payment. Now, what happens if two trustees are authorizing payments and payments are being made without quorum authorization? I don't know if this is on the topic or off the topic, but it seems to me that this verges on something cyber wrong.
I don't know, Mike, it sounds like it's a bit off the topic. You're welcome to add your comments.
Yeah, okay. So no, it's a good point. So it's probably half as a Linda and half a Mike answer. So from an insurance point of view, I'll do that part. Is that if you've got a two-step process, the risk is lowered. Whether or not you needed whatever to, even, I mean, you might even have a specific rule or directive from a meeting that tells you that you can't do this or can't do that. The insurance company, aren't going to drill that deep. Money was stolen because a naughty hacker got in, the thief got in, and he took the money. The insurance company are going to be more interested in, whether you actually answered the questions correctly in the first place, and whether that you were taking all of the correct measures. Did you in fact have a two-step process that day, or did somebody just quickly release a payment on their own? I think that would be the critical thing in terms of cover. But in terms of how you might authorize a payment and whether you need all the trustees to approve it or not with the resolution, Zelinda, that's your side.
I think the fact that I need to answer a question means that we're definitely off topic today, because I'm not not my show today. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see. Oh, Lillian, you posted a question. I think we'll take one or two more and then we'll wrap it up. The Act states that if two, you're answering the questions. There we go. The Act states that if two trustees or managing agent and a trustee sign the document, it becomes a legal document. Fantastic. I don't see anybody else hand up, and I don't see any more questions on the group. So I'd just like to say thank you very much again to Leigh-Anne. Thank you very much to Mike. Thank you for the prize. Just a reminder, if you are interested in taking us up on any of the services that we have to offer today, just to contact either Nicole or myself, Nicole at tvdmconsultants.com, Zelinda at tvdmconsultants.com, or info@tvdmconsultants.com. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That will be the end of our third webinar. Please keep an eye out for the recording as well as the slides, and then of course the invitation to the next one. Thank you very much and have a good day further.
Thanks,
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye and thank you.
Thank you.